Hello, my name is Simon. Welcome to Why Is That, a free speech platform where we explore big ideas and the controversies of our time. Hello, beloveds, and welcome back to another episode of Why Is That, where we look at big ideas and the controversies of our time. This week we're kind of, little known fact, I'm cursed, not just with devilishly good looks making me wonder if women are with me just because, I'm good looking or not, but also with really bad luck. So today's guest was meant to be in the studio, but he's got a family member in hospital, so we're doing it by phone. We haven't had the pre-show talk, but I'm sure we can do that. Okay. Today's topic is on West Papua and the independence movement there. Little known fact, Indonesia, the world's largest Muslim country, is basically invaded and occupied a Christian majority country. And yes, today we've got Joe Colo. Hi, Joe.
Hey, how's it going, Simon?
So can you tell me a bit how you got involved with all this?
So basically the West Papua conflict in which Indonesia has, in effect, just invaded a Pacific country. The Pacific nation is a concern of not just people from Papua, but of, everyone else in the Pacific as well. The Pacific family of peoples are a very close-knit family. There is a lot of common cultural similarities between the cultures and our lifestyle and the way we live and our attachment and our relationship with the land and the ocean around us. So we see this as not only standing in solidarity with people in our neighborhood, but it's a human rights issue which is very close to home to many of us. So the West Papua movement for us is it's quite personal, it's quite close to home, and so those of us who have been involved in it have gotten involved in it, not only because it's a human rights abuse so close to home, but because we feel it is, as Pacific people, our duty to advocate for our brothers and sisters in West Papua.
I didn't think I would be doing another show so soon covering the topic of genocide, which we'll get into a bit later. Now, it's kind of odd because Indonesia, of course, is regarded as an Asian country, and you look at the island of Papua, and, half of it's kind of, you look on the map, half of it's kind of Asia, but in the other half's part of the Pacific. But the people who are living in the western half are, of course, ethnic Melanesians. Right,
yes.
And the majority religion is Christian, I believe, with some traditional beliefs.
Yeah, there is. I'm not quite sure what the statistics are in West Papua because up until, and even now, it's very hard to get any data or information from Indonesia as to the demographics and, even a census of sorts of West Papua, so it's hard to know. But judging from many West Papuans that we do know and have come across, there is a large Christian population, but there's also a large amounts of, animism and, indigenous religions which are still surviving despite all that they're going through.
Now, as I understand, West Papua is kind of something of a no-go area for like Western media or media in general. As I understand it, the province, well, they've split into two provinces, but they're administered by the military. Is that right?
Yes, yes, they are. So up until recently, and I think still now, there is still a very strictly enforced ban on international media, and even local media groups find it very difficult. They're gagged and all sorts of things. There's no opposition to the Indonesian government allowed of any sort. And so up until recently, it's been very hard. The information that's been coming out of West Papua has been very sketchy, and what we do know of the situation in West Papua is largely driven by West Papuans who are leading the movement, and that's really come to light through social media and in recent years, and that's how the movement itself has been gaining momentum. It's through social media.
Okay, just to give people some history about West Papua. Basically, Dutch influence started in 1660. So, and basically they gained control over the territory. In 1824, Britain and Netherlands split the island. So Papua New Guinea was a British territory, and Western Papua was part of the Dutch East Indies.
That's right.
During the 1930s, exploration started happening from Dutch, American, British, and Japanese companies to do with the mineral and oil reserves there. The island was occupied in 1942 by the Japanese, and after the war regained by the Dutch. But in 1944, the Dutch East Indies was given independence by the Dutch. It was recognized, except for West Papua, as the Dutch argued that they were ethnically, religiously, and regionally different. And so they were going to keep administration until they could gain independence and stand on their own 2 feet themselves.
Yeah, so the Dutch agreed to, it was until 1962 that the Dutch agreed to relinquish the territory to the United Nations. And so they went to New York, they signed the New York Agreement, and then, with the understanding that there would be a vote of what was called the Act of Free Choice, but as many Papuans know it now, it's an Act of No Choice. And so that's a bit of the context in which we're operating from now. There's a lot of heavy colonial influence. There was a lot of, even with the Kennedy administration, they were particularly opposed to Papua becoming independent because they wanted to stay on side with Indonesia. And as you know, during that time, it was the Cold War, and everyone was scrambling for some kind of foothold in the Pacific. And the Kennedy administration were a bit worried that if the U.S. was seen as an aggressor or lobbying for West Papua to be independent, that the Russians and the Chinese could move in and take advantage of that. So there's a lot of political history and context that's kind of brought us to the situation we're in now. And so, in 1969, they had the vote for the Act of Free Choice. And it was the Indonesian military who picked, I think just over 1,000 people to stand and vote. And it was at gunpoint by a show of hands whether they wanted to stay, whether they wanted to be part of Indonesia or if they wanted to be an independent state of their own. So, it's quite a messy beginning to this whole fiasco. It's obviously gotten worse since then, and that's why groups now are calling for a new vote, calling on the UN to not recognize that prior vote because of the circumstances around it. And they're calling for a new vote, and that's what we are lobbying for now.
If you look at it, they were very keen for independence from the Netherlands. So, that the Indonesia, who they were under temporary administration from, that all 1,000+ representatives voted unanimously to join Indonesia. That doesn't seem right, does it?
No, of course not. And when you got a gun to your head and a family and relatives to worry about, you're not gonna, it's gonna be very hard to go against the man with the AK-47 pointing right at you.
So West Papua sovereignty seems to be a casualty of a conflict that's been over for at least 25 years now.
Yeah. And to the Dutch, to their credit, the Indonesians saw themselves as, the natural successors of the Dutch as they were planning to pull out of all their colonies. But the Dutch saw that, West Papua was ethnically different, religiously different, culturally different in every way from the rest of Southeast Asia, from the Indonesians in particular. And so that's why they were pushing for West Papua to go through the process of self-determination.
Because I've talked to a number of Indonesians who, of course, ethnically and culturally the same as the majority in Indonesia, but, you know, who are Christians, and they report, you know, huge persecution. And, of course, somebody who completely different ethnic language, you know, also religion as well. Well, it's not that would go worse. That has been going worse, hasn't it?
It has, and you know, ever since Indonesia took control of the province, I think in 1963, the military has been a presence in there. This year alone, you know, over 3,000 young people have been arrested for, you know, the protests that they've been organising. This is West Papua in this year alone. But since 1963, you know, over 500,000 West Papuans have been killed. And this is the mass genocide the world has kind of forgotten about, or is forgetting about. And when you consider the amount of, you know, when we think back to Rwanda now and how 1 million people were killed there in Rwanda, we're now creeping over the halfway mark. And I really hope that it doesn't have to get to 1 million before the world actually decides, hey, it's time to step in and put an end to this. But yeah, the regime is quite brutal. You only have to go into any Free West Papua page on any social media platform to see the pictures and the videos for yourself. There are pictures of Indonesian, you know, military personnel posing next to, you know, dead Papuans that they've killed, and you know, they've been taking pictures and putting it in their own private Facebook and Twitter pages. So not only is there a huge persecution of West Papuans, but what's even worse is that they're treated subhuman. There is no regard for their human dignity, no regard for the fact that they are the indigenous people of that land, or West Papua. There is no consideration of the fact that they are actually invaders of West Papua. So the treatment that the poor West Papuans are facing at the hands of the Indonesian military is, you know, it's state-sponsored terrorism. That's the only way to put it.
Because when we're talking about genocide, a lot of people think, well, they're not actively trying to wipe out all the Melanesian people of West Papua, but it is quite a diverse region with a number of tribes with their own language and history and culture, etc. And some of these have been wiped off, you know. And also, when I've been looking into this, even the Papua is quite ethnically diverse as well, genetically, should I say, with different. A lot of scientists look into the different haplogroups and things that are, you know. So it's one tribe. You know, apparently it has one person left. I mean, others have been wiped out, but, you know, it's like, okay, there's one person left here, and another one, there's another family, there's a family of, like, 4 people left, you know, it's just, you know, if there's no media coverage, you know, you can't go put a name to a face to that particular tribe that was wiped out, can you?
Right. No, you can't. And there are hundreds of tribes on the island of Papua and West Papua in particular. I don't want to speak for, you know, the cultural nuances or, you know, the different things regarding Papua, because I'm not Papuan. But I will say is that Papua is Melanesian. It is not Indonesian. And so we not only do we have to recognize that fact, but there is a wholesale, systematic persecution of the Papuan people, or these Melanesians, from a foreign aggressor who is Indonesian. And I think the problem with the media is, yes, there's been an international media ban. Yes, media journalists who have gone in have been persecuted, and I know some of them. But also just the lack of investigative journalism from our side and just from around the world. There's a lack of media interest altogether. And if it wasn't for, you know, the work that people were doing on social media, we wouldn't have the amount of knowledge that we know about West Papua now. So that's something I think, you know, we have to consider, especially those involved in, you know, the media today, is that, yes, you can't it'll be dangerous for you to go into West Papua, but that doesn't mean that we refuse to shine a light on what's happening in there. And I think New Zealand and Australia particularly have an important role to play in that, being the closest Pacific neighbours to West Papua, but also the United States. You know, they like to call themselves the protectors of democracy and freedom, yet they had a very strong part to play in West Papua losing any hope of sovereignty. So there are a lot of things to consider in this case.
Yeah, on the topic of the Americans, it's just not to do with the New York Agreement and the Cold War. West Papua is quite rich in, as we've covered, minerals and oil and other things. It has the world's largest gold mine, as I understand.
That's right. That's the Grasberg gold mine.
And
it's got quite a lot of foreign mining companies in there as well. I mean, you've got BP from the UK, ConocoPhillips from the US, Freeport McMoran from the US, and then there's quite a number of Australian companies in there. So there's a lot of Western mining companies that are in there, as long as Indonesian ones as well. So yeah, it's a bit it's messy. The whole thing is messy.
Looking into it, the largest mine is owned by the Freeport Group or Corporation or whatever you call it, and it hires the Indonesian military to do security for it.
That's right. And it's also got the third largest copper mine in the world, which is also a vested interest from both Australian and American mining entities. So yeah, you can see the conflict arising out of that sticky situation in itself.
Well, especially apparently the Indonesian military only gets a third of its funding from the state. So, basically they are in the pockets of a lot of these Western countries who are making up the rest of its, the rest of its operational costs.
That's right.
But also these Western countries, Western companies don't seem to be adhering to any sort of environmental standards.
Exactly. Everyone profits from West Papua except for the Papuans. And that's a quote from one of the leaders now, is Benny Wenda. There's wholesale logging, desecration of, there's a lot of cultural and sacred lands in Papua which the Indonesians have no regard for. They just go in wholesale and just do whatever they want. They are in the pockets of foreign mining companies. And, as I said, illegal logging is rife in West Papua. And when you have the world's largest gold and copper mine, it's causing a lot of it is there's a lot of permanent damage that's been caused in the region. And so, yeah, that's another justice issue altogether. Aside from the sovereignty issue, there's also the stripping of the land issue as well.
Because, a lot of the industrial waste runs into the rivers, and a lot of the river system is dead. There's nothing that can survive in it.
Yeah, exactly. So,
and also looking, if people, and we of course encourage you to look into the history of what they call the Papua conflict. During the 60s, 70s and 80s, if you look at, they basically did huge pushes to push off West Papuans off their land, and some of the casualty counts and some of these, you see like 13,000, and that was from one push, and they had a number of such pushes. Through aerial bombardment. So
yeah, and that's caused a refugee crisis of its own. There's about 14,000 Papuan refugees now living in neighbouring Papua New Guinea, and so that's causing a bit of strain as well on PNG's side. That's causing a bit of tension as well between PNG. Has caused a bit of tension between PNG and Indonesia as well, with many border skirmishes here and there. But by and large, Papua New Guinea as well has not really come out in full support of sovereignty for its neighbour. So they are equally liable as well for a lot of the hardship that West Papuans are facing.
Because I understand a lot of these refugees don't get any support from the Papua New Guinea government.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the social system is on the ground in Papua New Guinea, but the mere fact that West Papuans are being uprooted from their ancestral lands, from their families, is it's a crime unto itself.
Indeed. Now, there's, as we talked about before, basically, and from my own research, it does seem like they regard the native population as less, subhuman. Basically, there's a lot of allegations of, basically a lot of people just disappear, and accusations of torture and mass rape, etc. There's also what I found interesting was the religious persecution. So if you want to, the majority seem to be Christian, but if you want to build a church, you have to have the signature of 60 Muslims to do so.
Yep. I have some friends on the ground there now, and they're finding it incredibly difficult. Some of them are planting churches, some of them even doing basic aid work, and they're finding they're constantly running into this very extremist kind of mindset. And I don't know whether it's because of political pressures or because of some skewing of Muslim ideology, but there is definitely a very extremist thread of Islam, which is one of the catalysts for persecuting a lot of the Christian minority that's there.
Because we're looking at, just bring up some figures. It's estimated anywhere between 150,000 and 400,000 have been the casualty over the last 50 years. Now, when you think about it, of
the genocide you're talking about?
Oh well, just the everything to do with.
Yeah, it's over 500,000 now.
Okay, but just with the pushes where about like one where 13,000 were killed in a few months. That's people don't think about. Well, those people would have had kids and would have multiplied. So all these little. There should be a hell of a lot more West Papuans than there are now.
Yeah, and I think West Papuans and the West Papua movement, they're like any other freedom struggle. Of course, there would be a bit of tension or infighting, but by and large, West Papuans are pretty much doing all they can. The movement is strong in West Papua, and it's grown. Overseas, there is a massive overseas support for a free West Papua. But what we need is governments of the region to be a bit more active in advocating for these people, and we need the United Nations and especially the Security Council to come to the aid of these people. I mean, you think about Rwanda, you think about Kosovo and the former Yugoslavia, you think about all those cases where people were butchered by the thousands, and the UN and foreign peacekeepers always kind of wait until it's really bad. And for West Papua, we're now creeping up to close to Rwanda numbers, and we really need the international community to rally behind the Free West Papua movement and really pressure the Indonesian government to grant them their sovereignty. Now, granted, there are issues of sovereignty and that to take into consideration. The typical response from these international bodies is economic sanctions and whatnot. The problem with that is that those at the top don't suffer from economic sanctions. It'll affect the most vulnerable, in this case the people of West Papua. So we need to come to a creative consensus on how best to engage with this issue, how best to bring the international community in to pressure the Indonesian government to cease immediately the human rights abuses in West Papua, and then B, look at beginning the process of a vote once again, and then from there we can have UN observers come in and really have some kind of transparent, accountable process whereby the people of West Papua can determine their own future.
Okay, we've got about 4 minutes left, yeah, just on that, I was reading about how the head of the West Papua independence movement has called on European Western nations. It's like, they're not going to listen to us. We're in the Pacific Island. You guys need to add pressure. It's where to go from here, because on the ground, if it's I think it's a 12-year prison sentence for owning a West Papua independence flag in the territory. Right, yeah. But there was some good news recently with West Papua being accepted into the Melanesian Spearhead Group. Could you talk a little bit about that?
So in December, the Melanesian Spearhead Group will meet and formalise West Papua's full membership. They were granted observer status before, and that was a bit of an achievement. But now having full membership is a step closer to recognising their sovereignty.
So can you just explain what the group is?
So the Melanesian Spearhead Group is a political union, or for want of a better word, it's a coalition of all the Melanesian countries. So, you have West Papua, Papua New Guinea, Fiji, Vanuatu, the Solomons, and they look at regional issues that affect them and how they can work together in this forum to advance, the interests of the region. So West Papua being part of that, gives the status of West Papua as a sovereign entity a massive boost. It tells the rest of the world that the rest of Melanesia recognizes West Papua as its own and as part of Melanesia, not Indonesia. And it gives, it raises the bar. It creates a platform to continue the struggle, this long walk to freedom, which West Papua is on. The problem that we have now is that because Papua New Guinea and Fiji have economic and close political ties with Indonesia, they're not so welcoming. And so, fortunately, the both Vanuatu and Solomon Islands are standing strong behind their brothers and sisters in West Papua. And so, come December, when they become a full member of the Melanesian Spearhead Group, it'll be interesting to observe, firstly, how Indonesia reacts, how that changes the dynamics within the Melanesian Spearhead Group as well, and then also how the United Nations and the rest of the international community responds to West Papua's status as part of that group.
Yes, and I hope it's an interesting case study. I don't know. I keep thinking about the European migrant crisis and what could go wrong there.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting case study, but we always have to remember that there is a human face to this. This is not, because we've become so accustomed to genocides and conflict and that sort of thing. It's easy to just kind of shelve this as one of many. But for us, particularly here in New Zealand, we really need to really have I would encourage anyone who is listening to this to just look into it and listen to the stories of the people of West Papua, listen to their struggles and the history of their fight for their freedom, and then it's as easy as just kind of getting informed and letting other people know. Governments don't move unless communities and people pressure them to move, and people won't move unless they're informed. So those of us who are informed about this have a moral responsibility to the people of West Papua and to our own conscience to, really help the people here and inform as many people as we can about their struggle for their freedom.
Okay, well, that's all the time we have today, but thank you, Joe, for joining us. And finish the show with a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. "And injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." Join me, Simon, and guests, 104.6 FM at 3:15 on Tuesdays for my show, Why Is That? Or anytime online at planetaudio.org.nz/Why Is That? You can also type in Why Is That into YouTube, and it's hosted on the channel Dialectic already.